When the war was going on, were you separated from your family?
No, I was one of the few lucky people who lived through the whole war and the Holocaust and hiding and everything with my parents and my sister.
Okay. After the war, did your views change on practicing Judaism?
No, it never even occurred to me not to be Jewish. This is what we were, and we were very satisfied with being it.
What was it like to have to hide your religion and yourself?
Well, we didn't, in the beginning, we did not hide our religion because the Germans became very organized and wanted us to be identified easily. So we all wore a yellow star like this on our left side with the word Jew in French, of course, and we were not allowed anywhere out in public without one of those on our chest. So we could not hide our religion. But when it was so easy to identify us and we were being used as hostages when they needed to shoot some people, or if they wanted to pick us up to send us to the concentration camps, then we had to either go to the camps or, if we were lucky enough, go into hiding. So then we took this off and hid our identity.
When the war was over, did you feel safe? If not, when did you feel safe?
Oh, when the minute the Americans came, we felt safe. And that was long before the war was over, because we were hidden in a village west of Paris, and we were liberated on the 15th of August 1944, 11 days before Paris was liberated. So we felt, as soon as the Americans came, we felt safe.
When did you guys move to the United States?
I came to the United States on the 27th of April 1946. I met my husband, who was an American soldier, after the liberation of Paris, and after he was sent home and all the official papers were prepared, I came in 1946.
When you were in hiding, what did you think about?
When I was in hiding, what I thought about, well, it was very difficult. We were in hiding in a village that was very primitive, no electricity, no running water, an empty farmhouse with dirt floors, no furniture. And we lived like this for 2 years. And there wasn't too much to think about the first year because I lived with my parents and my younger sister, and it was very boring. I was a teenager. And then, suddenly, they needed me in the French resistance. So I was drafted and I became a liaison agent. I carried messages. I looked for American and English crews that went to bomb Germany and whose planes crashed in our area. I would bring them civilian clothes and take them to a safe place. If we needed to blow up a bridge or a railroad track, I carried the explosives on my bicycle in the afternoon, and during the night the men came and blew up the bridge or the railroad track. What else did I do? When we received secret messages over the BBC radio from London that we were due to receive arms and guns and ammunition and shoes, We would go to a field at night with flashlights and wait. When we heard the planes coming, we would turn on the flashlights to give them a perimeter where to drop the containers. And my job, after the containers hit the ground, the men would cut off the parachutes, load the containers on carts and get out of there. And I would be left behind to gather up the parachutes. And believe me, they were heavy, it's huge. And drag them, put them into pre-dug holes, cover up the holes with branches and get out of there on my bike before the Germans arrived. And after the war I went back to that field and I dug up some parachutes, and before I came to the United States it was still difficult to find clothes. I had clothes made out of parachute material, and here is one blouse. Made out of a white parachute, all embroidered by the seamstress, and it came in red, in yellow, and in green, and khaki. So I had blouses made. So this is what I did in the village.
How old were you when the war broke out?
I was 15 when the war broke out. I was 20 when the war ended. So I was a kid when it started, I was a grown woman when it ended, and that 5 years, which are very important in a person's life, and which I missed. For example, when the war ended, I was 20, I had never had my hair cut by a barber, or in a salon. I did it myself. I never wore lipstick, I never wore stockings, I never wore high heels. I was a woman with the social skills of a teenager.
Did you ever think the war was going to end?
Pardon me, did I ever
Think the war was going to end?
think that the war was going to? Well, at times we doubted it. It lasted 5 years, and we thought every year that, oh, it must be the last one. It can't go another, we couldn't stand it for another minute. And we had to stand it for 5 years. But once the Americans got on the continent, we became very optimistic and anxious and happy and waited and helped as much as we could. So it was a happy time.
When you were in hiding, did you meet any friends? If so, did you stay in touch with any of them?
When we were in hiding, we had just a few friends. First, we had a man who took care of the village, of the working of the village, and he knew that we were Jewish, and he protected us and gave us, sometimes the farmers would not pick up their fruit coupons. He saved them for us. And we had one more family who was friends of ours, but we stayed away and kept to ourselves so people wouldn't start wondering what we were doing there.
How long were you in hiding?
2 years. On the 16th of July 1942, I was crossing a street with my star on my chest. The policeman directing traffic whispered to me that during the night the Germans were going to round up all the Jews living in Paris. And that's when we went into hiding. And that night they came for us, and they banged on the door during the night. We went home, so they broke in. And in the morning, when we wanted to return home, we couldn't because they were already moving our furniture out. So we never went back home. So that's when we started. We were hidden by the parents of my best friend in high school. They didn't really know us. They didn't know we were Jewish. We never visited each other's homes. But my friend was very upset with what was happening to me. She was upset when I came to school with my yellow star on my chest. And that started it. She went home, told her parents that I had to wear that. Then when I wasn't allowed anywhere in public, I wasn't allowed even to sit on a park bench, then she reported to her parents. And finally, the more things were happening, her parents were wondering what's going on, and they came to visit with us and befriended us and kept an eye on us. And when the policeman warned us that we were going to be picked up, my friend's father came that evening to see if we were all right. We told him what the policeman said, and he immediately invited us to spend the night at their apartment. And we did. And we never went back home. We stayed with them for 6 weeks, and then they took us out to the village. Now, to take us out to the village was very difficult because you could not board the train without showing your identity card. And our identity cards, when we got the stars, they also stamped our cards with a red rubber stamp with the word Jew on it. And this is what a French identity card looks like. You see? It has my picture, your name, where you were, your date of birth and where you were born, and here a description, how tall you are, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes. And here they had the word Jew stamped. Now this is a false identity card, which was made for me when I was in the resistance, because you had to have one all the time with yourself. You would be stopped by patrols, they wanted to see your papers. So when we went to the village, we could not use our identity cards because we would be immediately arrested and sent to a concentration camp since it had the word Jew on it. So my friend's father took my mother, my sister and me, and my mother, my sister and I carried the identity cards of his wife and his 2 daughters. And we just hoped that before we boarded the train, when we had to show it, that the Germans won't look at the pictures too closely. And they didn't, and he took us to the village, then he came back with all the papers, and the next day his wife and his 2 daughters took my father with the same paper and brought him to the village. So those people risked their lives and the lives of their children to save us. This is what we call the righteous Gentiles. Maybe you heard that expression, no?
Yeah.
People who risk their lives to help save Jewish lives. We have in Harrisburg a garden honoring them at Bethel Temple. And in Jerusalem there is, at Yad Vashem, a whole alley for the righteous Gentiles with trees planted in their honor, because you could never thank those people enough.
When you were afraid, did you show it, or did you just hide it?
Well, to tell you the truth, no, I was never really afraid. You know, when you're very young, you don't think anything can happen to you. I had many close calls, but I just couldn't imagine anything happening to me. So I did what I was supposed to. Like, I was given a gun, and I was told not to try to shoot the Germans, but if I saw that I was being caught, to shoot myself. So I brought the gun home. My mother said, "What is that?" I said, "That's a gun I'm supposed to shoot myself with." And my mother took the gun right away and buried it in the garden. So I never carried it. I was afraid after the fact. And now that I'm older, when I think of it, I'm afraid.
Is your family still in touch with you now?
my family?
Still in touch with you?
My family, well, my parents passed away. My sister lives in Paris with her family, and of course we are in touch all the time. My best friend Josette, whose family saved us, is in touch with me all the time, and when I go there I see her, and she came here several times with her husband to visit me, and she still worries about me. When the Walnut Street Bridge fell into the Susquehanna, she called me right away. You know, everybody watches CNN all over the world. And she said, what kind of weather is this? Come over. So she still worries about me.
After the war had ended, were you afraid it was going to happen again?
This would happen again?
Yeah.
Well, yes, there is always, you know, you can't trust things to be good all the time. This is why I often speak to school, so that it wouldn't happen again. But it might, who knows, there are bad people. Look what's happened in Iraq right now with the prisoners of war.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Americans doing that? So it could happen again, but hopefully it won't.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Do I have
Anything else that you would like to add to it?
Well, I think I've been very lucky in my life. I've had a lot of love. If my friend wouldn't have loved me so much, her family would not have saved us. I met my husband. We've been married 58 years. So that's a long time. I have lovely children, 6 grandchildren, and I've had a very happy life.
Did you think that you were going to after the war ended?
Well, I was always optimistic, and I was hoping, everybody hopes to have a happy life. I was lucky I did.
Is that everything?
What else could I tell you? Well, you met my husband. He's 89 years old. I'm 80. I was 80 on Monday. So I'm a little old lady now.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I have 6 grandchildren, 24, 22, 19, 16, 13, and a 2-year-old who was just adopted 2 years ago. So I enjoy them and I have a great time with them. I babysit.
I guess that's it.
That's okay.
That's all I have. That's all you have?
Well, if you have any more questions.
I actually don't have any more. I can't think of any right now.
Yeah, you know, this whole Holocaust was such a well-organized event. I have a book, would you like to see it?
Yeah.
Of the Jews of France who have been deported to the concentration camps. And it's names in there. And it's the record, the German records. You see the name of the person, their place of birth, their date of birth, and which transport they took, which train, and how many took the train and how many came back. Like sometimes 1,700 left, 22 came back, the rest were killed. And it's a memorial to the Jews deported from France between 1942 and 1944. And if you look at the pictures, like this picture of the 2 girls, well, that reminds me of myself. That's how we looked with that star on our chest.
Okay, is that what they're wearing, one of the stars?
It's a yellow star.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a heavy book.
Yeah, hold it to the camera.
I don't want in that picture at all.
Isn't that pretty? Alright.
You done?
Yes.
Okay.
And you see the picture of the young mothers with their babies. They would take them all together, and then they didn't want the babies, so they were killed all together. Just young mothers with babies.
Well, this is. See, I'm not familiar with this, but this is where. Turn that off.
I don't know how to explain it. For example, they had like orders to take all the Jews from one building, and they would go into. My father had a business. He had a tannery for small leathers, you know, for pocketbooks.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted a pocketbook that looked like alligator, but it's very expensive. He had a machine that imprinted it, and it looked like alligator, things like that. And he had a foreman working in the factory who happened to be Jewish, and he was a prisoner of war in Germany. But his wife and his 3-year-old little girl were in Paris. So on the 16th of July, when they rounded up all the Jews, they were supposed to pick up the Jews in her building where she lived. But she woke up early in the morning, and she went down in the same building. On the ground floor was a bakery. She went down to buy a loaf of bread. And the little girl was asleep. She was 3 years old. The Germans came, banged on the door. She wasn't there. They broke in, grabbed the kid in her nightgown, and as they threw her into the truck, the mother came out of the bakery and wanted to get on the truck. They wouldn't allow her to get on the truck because the rules were the Jews in the building. So they took the kid, who probably died within 2 weeks. When her husband came back, he blamed her for having abandoned the child. And their life was such hell after that. He blaming her, she feeling so guilty. They both died within 6 months after the war. They were young people. So, you know, there were all kind of tragedies.
What was your restrictions of being a Jew?
Oh, first of all, the food restrictions. We didn't get as many food coupons, just enough to survive. And the food was used, the shortage of food was used as propaganda. The newspapers would have big headlines saying, "Citizens of France, do you know why we are hungry? The Jews are eating all our food." And you know, when you stand in line for 6 hours to get something, you start to believe it. I had an incident that happened to me. One day the person who sold vegetables in the market had a sign that the next morning she was going to have cauliflowers without coupons. So at 6 a.m., my mother went down to stand in line, and before she left, she woke me up and she asked me to replace her at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock I went down and I stood in line. And at 10 o'clock the stand opened. So the women were there at least already 4 hours. When my turn came, there was one cauliflower left. Of course, the first person in line chose the biggest cauliflower, and it was about that big. And she weighed it, she wrapped it in a piece of newspaper, I paid for it, and I picked it up, and the woman behind me said, "The Germans are right, the Jews are eating all our food." And she grabbed my cauliflower and left. And all the women behind her just beat me up. And I came home with a bloody nose and a split lip. I still have a little scar. And all the buttons of my blouse torn off. They were just getting their frustration out on me. And that's the last time I was allowed to stand in line for food. So, you know, it was unpleasant living. And also, if you ever went out without your star and one of your neighbors saw you and would denounce you to the police that you didn't wear your star, your neighbor would get a large cash reward and you would be sent to a concentration camp. So it was you had to be very careful to obey all the rules so you wouldn't be denounced.
Wow. That's nuts.
And then the Americans came, and all this was in the past. We were all thankful and happy, and they were wonderful and so generous. We had Hershey bars and cigarettes and chewing gum.
Is that all?
And you think you got it hard.
Well, life is wonderful here. Now it's getting pretty good in Europe too. They are modernized.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think about going back over there?
Do I go back?
Yeah.
Yes, I go. Well, I don't go back as often now, but when my parents were alive, I went back often because I wanted my children to know them. And I must say that my children felt very close to my family. They both spoke French. And now that my parents are gone, I go to see my sister. But I'm getting old and it's so stressful traveling now that I just don't feel like. And it's so hard to get out of Harrisburg. So if there was a flight from Harrisburg to Paris, I'd be going much more often than having to go to New York and spend, it's a 48-hour trip instead of 6 hours.
Do you have anything else?
This is about all I have to say.
Okay.
Well, I've enjoyed my life in the United States. I was very lucky to find a job as soon as I was married. And I taught French for 26 years. First for 3 years, and I had my children, and in those days, you didn't work if you had children. They didn't expect you to work, so I stayed home for 15 years. Then I went back to work, and I taught again for 23 years, and I enjoyed being with young people. In the first year in America was very difficult, mostly that my husband told me that if I marry him, he will take me to the most wonderful town in all the United States.
Was that here?
Middletown.
Middletown.
So I came from Paris to Middletown. And that was a shock. I said, where are the skyscrapers?
Well, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.